All right.
All right, you can go.
All right, we're ready. Okay. All right, good afternoon, Congressman. First, let's talk tax reform. Do you think the current plan is going to get through the Senate?
Well, I hope so. It needs to. You know, listen, the people of Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, they're looking for a pay raise. They're looking for better jobs. They're looking for a simpler tax code, and this tax plan would deliver that. I'm very optimistic we'll get this plan out of the House. Frankly, I'm less optimistic it's going to pass in the Senate just because the Senate's broken. Too many big ticket items like Obamacare repeal are failing in the Senate by one vote. In fact, that's why I'm running for the United States Senate over in Indiana. But we need to deliver on tax reform, and I'm hopeful we will.
Under the current plan, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Congressional Budget Office just came out with some figures on it that it would add to the deficit. So will you vote for a plan that adds to the deficit?
Well, look, I believe that history shows the only time we've ever paid down the deficit and the debt was in the 1990s when we had 4% growth. So our best opportunity to actually pay down the debt is to have a healthy economy with more good-paying jobs, so you have more taxpayers that then have the ability to even pay taxes. So I'm optimistic we can pass this tax cut, create the kind of healthy economy that creates better-paying jobs, and eventually pay down the debt.
What's left in the plan? I know the 401k reduction idea is gone. What about state and local tax deductions? What's happening with that? And home mortgages?
Yeah, I think that's I think that when people want a simpler, fairer tax code, and the current system's riddled with all kinds of special interest exceptions. One of those is the exemption for state and local taxes that basically creates a situation where the citizens of Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky are subsidizing taxpayers in high tax states like New York or New Jersey or California. So I think that's a change in the law that's only fair. It will help us provide lower tax rates for the working Americans, and you know, I'm optimistic we can get that done. The bill does also include the continuation of the mortgage tax exemption, which is one of the most popular exemptions. It would apply all the way up to homes that have a principal of debt owed of $500,000 or more. So the vast majority of working families are going to see no change to their mortgage tax exemption.
If you look at the brackets, it seems like in every bracket you get a tax cut. But if you eliminate state and local deductions, and you're saying Indiana, maybe they're subsidizing places like New York and California, but Hamilton County, it's a big urban area.
Yeah.
Property taxes are pretty high in Cincinnati. They're not among the lowest in the country by any means. So have you done any figures? If you take out state and local deductions in every bracket, are you still getting a tax cut?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at the median American family and the tax cut they will receive for the typical family of four. That's going to be up to a $2,000 tax cut for most of the folks there in your viewing area. I mean, listen, this is still a work in progress, and we're going to work our way through it. But I would say that for folks that live in Ohio and Kentucky and Indiana, where you have good local leadership and frankly lower taxes, that state and local exemption is going to be a net positive for you. It helps us pay for things like a higher tax credit in this bill, a higher child tax credit in this bill.
Any talk of expanding credits for medical savings accounts like the high deductible plans, the HSA accounts?
I think that's an important reform to broader health care. Listen, we need to put patients back in charge of their health care. One of the best ways to do that is to allow medical savings accounts and put the individual consumer into the position of being a consumer that can be in charge of their own health care. Whether or not those provisions fit into this law or not, into this tax bill, we'll have to see. But it's certainly the kind of idea that I'd like to see us get done yet this year.
I want to give you a chance to talk about your ideas for the child tax credit for illegal immigrants. Tell us about that. Yeah, listen, current law is broken. It allows a tax credit
for illegal immigrants. That's the wrong way to approach this policy. It makes no sense to literally provide a tax incentive for people to be here easily. The clearest way to fix it is just to change the requirement in the law so that a family has to have a valid Social Security number, not just a tax ID, before they can claim the child tax credit. There have been estimates as high as $7 billion a year that we currently pay out to illegal immigrants under the current law. That needs to change. I'm very excited that the Trump tax plan does include this change in the law. That's my legislation, and we'll be able to use that $7 billion in savings to provide bigger, larger child tax credits for families that are lawfully here in America.
Let's talk about what happened last night. The Democrats are saying, especially when you look at the governor races in Virginia and New Jersey, some of the mayoral races, that this was a referendum against the president. What do you say?
Yeah, I don't see it that way at all. Look, over in Indiana where I live, I know the vast majority of people I talk to are supportive of President Trump and the Trump agenda. They want to see us working hard to turn that agenda into law because they believe that if we could pass tax cuts, if we could repeal Obamacare and replace it with something better, if we could have better immigration laws and a stronger infrastructure, that we'd have a healthier economy and middle-class families would do much better. And I think what we need to do now is focus on delivering on those promises. Start here by cutting taxes for working families and then move on to the other items in the Trump agenda.
Was it a little bit of a wake-up call night, though?
Well, I have to admit to you, I live in Indiana, and I'm not very focused on the Virginia election, so I don't know a lot about what happened there. I just know what I hear over in Indiana, and over in Indiana, people are supportive of President Trump and his agenda.
Let's talk about the unfortunate situation last weekend, the mass shooting that we had, yet another one. Yeah. And the House Speaker said we need to pray more, and he was assailed for that by some people, especially Democrats, saying, well, that's not enough. What is enough at this time? Is this another? We saw the Air Force literally say, we made a mistake when it comes to tracking this guy. He should not have gotten a gun. Yeah. People should have had information. So that's a loophole that has to be plugged. But what else needs to happen?
Well, first, let me say, thoughts and prayers do matter. You know, my colleague Steve Scalise was the victim of a tragic gun shooting, and he told me so. So I don't think anybody ought to be downgrading thoughts and prayers. Of course, when you see what happened in Texas, it was a terrible tragedy, and all of America is heartbroken to see it. But gun control and more gun laws are not the answer. As you mentioned, it appears here that the bureaucratic system failed our country and failed the people of Texas. This gentleman was a convicted criminal. He'd been court-martialed, and Air Force bureaucrats appear to not have entered that information into the database that would have prevented this gentleman from obtaining guns lawfully. So this is an example where the existing gun laws weren't enforced, and we need to work on enforcing the current law, and then just be careful that we don't allow a tragedy like this to somehow otherwise undercut our liberties.
The fact that a neighbor had a gun and stopped this man eventually, is that an argument that people should have guns?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think it is important to point out that this gentleman was, I mean, the criminal, the murderer, was stopped by another gentleman who lawfully had a gun and used that gun to stop him. So, listen, the people that live in your viewing area, they understand that this is a great country. It's a part of what makes America great are our Second Amendment rights and liberties, and we need to make sure that we protect them while we work to enforce existing law and bring our thoughts and prayers to the families in Texas who've been the victims of a terrible crime.
We are out of time. One quick question. Do you have any town hall meetings planned in the upcoming weeks that we can tell people about?
Well, we've had literally dozens of town hall meetings across our district over the course of the last several years. It's tough here in the holidays with everything that we've got going on. So I know we have office hours that are well advertised in my district, that where we go to all the different counties. But I don't have a town hall meeting planned here in the coming weeks.
All right, keep in touch.